Hello and welcome to day 7 for the book reading of Guru Leela, book 3, Grace That Heals. I'm reading a chapter written by Militia Bulatovic, South Africa, and is titled Birth of True Self. We are one consciousness. I am never away from you. There is no existence in separation. Beingness is unity. We are one and never separate. I would like to share a recent experience that led me to complete peace through faith in my Guru, Brahmarishi Mohanji, and acceptance of life's circumstance that most people would call difficult or even extreme. It all started with the birth of my second daughter, Sophia Sage, on the 19th of January 2018. In Serbia, this day is called Bogojavli Jinje, meaning the day the god appeared. My first realization was that I couldn't label her as mine. I would look at other mothers in the room in the ICU and couldn't understand why we call children ours. She belonged to everyone equally as she belonged to me. She had incredible energy of peace and serenity in the first few days until the pain took over. She had very powerful energy too that I only realized after she left her physical body. Doctors had diagnosed with her with a rare congenital heart disease which was inoperable. Through the grace of Mohanji, I gathered the courage to accept this and live each day in full faith. The doctors could not understand my decision to continue with the pregnancy when they had informed me of this in the fifth month of pregnancy. They had advised immediate termination. In my heart, I could never ever think of termination. How can it be my choice? From day one, we didn't receive any warmth or helpful assistance from doctors, and this carried on till the last day of Sophia's short life. But to live with integrity is the only way, no matter what others may say. They only see from their level of understanding. I always believed that everything in life happens for a reason, and so did the birth of this incredible soul that graced us with her presence for just a short time. I still gave it my all, did all the research, as well as consulted the best specialists in the country to offer the best service to Sophia. After everyone confirmed the same prognosis, I settled into acceptance and looked after her the best I could to do with awareness that I had. There were many challenging moments, and a week would seem like an year, but I flowed from one situation to the next without getting or experiencing thoughts of hardship. My mantra was to stay natural and be myself at all times, no matter what others may say. If I needed to cry, I did. It would be just for a few minutes, and I would feel lighter as I wouldn't lose myself in emotions. The understanding of what was really happening would come, and I would learn more about myself in this way. I didn't realize that by choosing this mantra, I chose to fully accept myself, which led me to more powerful experiences. My heart was opening and embracing all situations instead of closing down with fear. I learned this is where the true strength lies, in acceptance and love. People were telling me that I was going through so much, but I could immediately think of many other situations happening somewhere else that were much worse. I simply didn't feel any pain. I started to understand that when something triggers painful emotions, this only means that we have those unresolved emotions from the past within us. Something that also made a huge difference was the understanding I had that Sophia's soul chose this experience and it was mainly for our growth and learning. We spent many weeks in the hospital, and those were the most trying days. We had to share a room with many other people and other children in pain, in pain, crying sometimes for even 24 hours. Sophia was incredible. She allowed it all to happen, even though every movement of her body was so uncomfortable. She would cry a lot, but she still chose to stay with us. I remember every time we had one or two good days, a glimpse of hope would come to me that she is doing better. She would reverse very soon to keep me off from getting off the road of acceptance and telling me that she is not staying. Whenever I was at a breaking point physically, help arrived and we just carried on until one day, a palliative care doctor came and told me that we could take Sophia home even if she was on oxygen, fed through the nasogastric tube, and on morphine. At first, I was really surprised because it never occurred to me, and she warned me that Sophia may also leave us at any moment, and we had to be prepared for that. At first, that really scared my husband and me, but I wanted us to go home and be in a peaceful environment as it was becoming unbearable in the hospital. I went with the flow of the events, and I felt that was exactly what we needed. Guidance would come from Mohanji's quotes, blogs, and even telepathically. This is how I stayed in the peace most of the time. Just observed everything, and higher awareness would just come, guide me, and teach me. When we are based firmly in truth, nothing can unbalance us. Looking back, it is obvious, very obvious now, how every event in life happens for a reason. We can choose to be emotional about it or accept and learn from it. When we learn from it, we honor life. We realize that life is a gift when you have when used for a higher purpose. Then no pain will ever affect you. This is what Sophia showed us. We are given life, but we don't own it. This body is on lease from God. Choose wisely and consciously what to do with it. Life is truly a gift. I just observed everything neutrally, no reference points, watching and responding to all of Sophia's needs and the other drama that was happening with people around me. At a certain point, I had to have the help of a nurse at home as feeding became challenging and there was so much more. Simply one person couldn't look after her anymore. To find the right person took a long time. As I would finish training one nurse, something would happen and they would leave for many different reasons. It was becoming very tiring and didn't feel like we received help at all. Until one day in the last week of Sophia's life, an incredible person just came into our lives. Gladys was just perfect. Gladys knew when to leave us alone for privacy and when to take over. She would know when to speak and when to be silent. So non intrusive, unlike most were. She learned fast all that needed to be done, and I felt like she was an extension of me. As in many such moments, I realized how we should never really worry even for a second. Again, the flow of life brought the right person when it was necessary and when certain karma was resolved. When we express our true nature to the world, there are no rules to play. I didn't identify with the role of a mother to Sophia. I didn't get lost in that identification. I was just neutral, giving her all the love possible and not getting caught in the emotions. To be honest, at certain still moments while I was holding her, it felt like she knew everything. She was aware of so much more. In those quiet moments, it felt like an exchange of energy and awareness. When she looked at you, she looked through you. I always sensed she can see it all. Her look was like looking at eternity. No beginning, no end. 2 days before she left her body, I was gifted a very special afternoon. It was a public holiday and it was very peaceful at home, a very pleasant and a sunny day. Sophia needed me to hold her that day. She was becoming very uncomfortable, so I held her in my arms while she was sleeping, and we sat in the garden the whole afternoon. The energy was incredible. I felt pure grace surround us. As my daughter Sarah joined us, she felt it instantly too. It felt like hundreds of angels were sitting with us. Sarah shared that there was the presence of the masters. I felt truly grateful for that day, and it still feels like a dream. It was interesting that my sister dreamt that night that we were all sitting in my home surrounded by masters. The next morning, she shared her dream with me. That night, Sophia got very unwell, and the next day was the hardest for all. She clearly was in a huge discomfort and could barely breathe. It seemed like the previous day gave me all that I needed to be completely calm and give her all my pure love and care. For some people who were with us that day, it was unbearable. But when I looked, allowed myself to flow, an invisible force, Mohanji's grace, took over. I realized that once you let go of concepts, you simply flow. If the mind is still, there is no reference point. Every moment is like new. No heaviness stays with you. So I didn't recognize the situation as hard or difficult, and I could respond better to her needs. Mohanji had explained to me that she was an elevated soul and that this happens very rarely that such a soul comes as a blood relation. I felt blessed. She decides when she will go and she knows what is best. The last day came and I was alone with Sophia as she was in a coma since the night before, so there was no need for any help. I did all my chanting, performed Sai Baba Aarti, which started playing on its own, and the Mohanji Aarti, and sat in complete peace with her. It was on the 29th of April. She left at the exact moment the moon was ascending on Buddha Purnima, the day when Ganeshanandagiri left his body 2 years ago. This was also Avaduta Nadananda's birthday. What an auspicious day! She attained the highest and chose the exact time for the rocket speed dissolution, as Mohanji wrote to me. At the moment of her passing, Sophia and I merged forever in love, without a trace of pain or sadness. When we love unconditionally, there is no room for pain or any emotion. That morning, there was a magnificent pink sunrise. Pink was never my color of choice, but lately I often see it. Even the sunset was pink for a few days after. So I checked the meaning of this color and found out that pink is the color of the universal love of oneness. Every moment is important as it is given to us to fulfill our purpose. Our breath is given to us. 2 years ago, when I was attending a weekend program with Mohanji, he had asked all the participants to share what they had learned during the program. I shared that there is nothing to do but just be. Today, I feel there is no need to even be, just merge. There is nothing to express but you. I find my home in you. This came to me as even the need to contemplate stopped. As Sophia took her last breath, I felt her become part of me, or I became a part of her. It was not a heavy moment, it was a moment of freedom. Her body was finally pain free, and I understand that she never suffered as she was fulfilling her purpose. When the purpose is clear, nothing can stand in your way. Numerous miracles were experienced after her passing. I felt completion and subtlety that I didn't feel before. Mohanji gave me the strength to face it all and held me tight and cleared the way and did so much more than we could ever know. The ability to love and to expand our hearts is where we find our true nature. Our true rebirth is in our hearts. I was given Sophia by Mohanji in the tradition. What was best for the completion of karma and my spiritual growth. It was all perfectly orchestrated for higher elevation and higher awareness of miracles of life. For a long time now, I have a feeling of amnesia that there is so much to remember and nothing to learn. Now it feels that it is the remembrance of my true being that has begun. None of the experiences and the inner discoveries would have been possible without Mohanji. From the depth of my being, I wish love and light to all. May we all wake up to the truth with his guidance and love, with surrender and deep gratitude to Mohanji. The next story is by Natesh Ramsel from the United States. It is titled A Date with Destiny. By finding out about Mohanji and having the opportunity to meet him halfway around the world just a few weeks later in March 2016 was filled with wonderful synchronicity. And how quickly it developed into a deep and a powerful connection continues to amaze me. The latter is due in large part to the fact that I have been connected to the traditions of India since 1975 and connected strongly with my first guru in 1979, despite my heavy skepticism about the whole notion of a guru and the major hurdle of having a Western educated analytical mind. Through sheer and abundant grace, I was given experiences that enabled me to get past those hurdles, and my life changed dramatically for the better. While there is much to that story and the many experiences I have been blessed to have with Mohanji in the few short years since meeting him, my focus here is on coming to know of and meeting Mohanji and a few instances that display what appear to be clear capacities beyond the normal state that give us a glimpse of Mohanji's stature. In early 2016, I decided it was finally time to take my first trip to India. It certainly took me a long time for several different reasons, and many of my friends were quite surprised to learn it would be my first visit. Although I had decided to join a planned pilgrimage with some other Americans, I also was inspired to visit the Mahasamadhi shrine of my first guru, and in preparation for the trip, did an internet search on how to visit his Samadhi shrine. As the universe would have it, I first clicked on a link near the top of the search results that took me to a blog on the Mohan Universe WordPress site. Reading the blog, I found there is when I first heard of Mohanji. I immediately wondered who is and why had he visited the Samadhi shrine. I clicked the link on the blog site to mohanji.org and began soaking it all up, starting with information about who Mohanji is and his transformation, discovering that he gives Shaktipat, a profound transfer of spiritual energy from master to disciple that I first experienced with my first guru. And then watching a few videos and discovering he gives satsangs in English. I was immediately drawn in by his clarity, warmth, and keen focus on liberation, and wondered if there was any way I might be able to meet him during my trip to India. Happily, I learned that there was a weekend program near Mumbai, of course, lined up perfectly with the end of the pilgrimage already booked. Given that the program would be in India, I figured it might not be in English nor with translation to English, but that didn't matter as I just wanted to experience meeting Mohanji and being around him for a couple of days. My entire first visit to India was extraordinary, and in retrospect, I can't think of a better way for it to have concluded than meeting Mohanji and attending that weekend program with him. He gave a satsang in English and was very personable, accessible, and approachable. The latter two qualities, in particular, certainly being a new and welcoming experience for me. As with other powerful masters, the spiritual energy, when being with Mohanji, shifts my consciousness into subtly altered states. I also had the profound blessing to be asked by him to chant while he was giving Shaktipat on the final day. I asked that my Shaktipat be at the end so I could be sure to be functional for chanting. When it was my turn, I came in front of Mohanji and knelt down. He put his thumb on my third eye and rested his fingers on the crown, as with others. The energy was powerful, and my body gently convulsed several times in reaction to the Kundalini Shakti coursing through it. Just as he removed his hand from my head, I glanced up at him, and his face was completely still and expressionless, and his eyes in Shambhavi Mudra, gazing upwards with eyelids half closed, and I could only see the whites of his eyes. It was as if the man Mohanji I had experienced as warm, welcoming, funny, and approachable wasn't even there. After that, I sat quietly for a while to let the energy sink in. I went on a blissful Mohanji binge after that first weekend. 3 weeks later, I attended a weekend program with him in Virginia and then wound up unexpectedly also going to spend time with him in Canada directly from Virginia. About a month later, in May 2016, I attended the Bosnian Pyramids retreat, which was truly remarkable. In June 2016, about a month after returning from the Bosnia trip, I drove to Southern California to lead the Kirtan at a weekend conference. It was at a resort which had several hot spring pools at different temperatures that we would enjoy in the evenings. On the last night there, I decided to take a final dip in the hot springs, but as I was headed through the lobby to get to the pools, I started strangely feeling a little dizzy. But when I got out of the hot spring pool a little later, I felt fine. The next day, I drove to the coast to spend a couple of days, and I had another episode. A third episode happened the next day while visiting a Hindu temple in Malibu. All three times it lasted only 20 to 30 minutes, and then I was fine. A couple of hours after the one at the temple, I started my roughly 500-mile solo drive home to Sedona, Arizona. A few hours into my journey, I got a call from Ganesh, who heads Mohanji Foundation, USA. He asked me if I was feeling okay and told me that Mohanji had contacted him a couple of times to ask him if he had spoken with me. Ganesh said he got the impression Mohanji was concerned about me, so he decided to call and check on me. As I was feeling fine at that time, not even recalling the three dizziness spells at that moment, I replied that I was fine and there was nothing to worry about. So I didn't know why Mohanji would be asking how I am doing. However, I experienced yet another spell several hours ago when I got out of my car in the North Phoenix with about a 90-minute drive yet to go to my home in Sedona. It was about 11:30 p.m. and I was pretty tired, so I napped in the car until about 1 and resumed the trip home, arriving at about 2:30 a.m. The next morning, I was feeling a bit dizzy again, and when I started to say something to Moni, my wife, the words came out garbled. I could not properly form or pronounce the words I was meaning to say. While she had been concerned that I might be having a stroke when I was still in California, now with the slurred speech, it was obvious that what was happening, and we wasted no time in getting me to the ER right away. My pulse was dropping below 40, triggering an alarm, and the initial thought was heart trouble. Though I could walk, they didn't even want me walking 30 feet to the restroom without being monitored and supervised. Later that night, I was taken to the hospital in a neighboring town by ambulance so that I would continually be monitored. The short version of what happened there is that it was determined that I indeed had a stroke, and the heart concern turned out to be unfounded for after several tests, including an angiogram. After a few days, I was transferred to a rehabilitation hospital in an even more distant town, which had been recommended because the stroke had been serious enough to warrant it. My recovery was remarkably swift and mostly complete. Unlike the rest of the patients at the rehab hospital, I could walk on my own, though I was chided the first night by the nurses for leaving my room unsupervised to take a walk in the corridors. My speech improved so quickly that by the time I had my first appointment with the speech therapist the next day, she said it won't be necessary to have any further appointments because she really couldn't help me further. I just needed to keep talking. The partial paralysis on my left side was not severe, but I was not able to play the chords of the guitar with my left hand when I arrived. The next day, I could form the chords, although slowly, and a pretty much one finger at a time. And the day after, I could change from chord to chord slowly. And the following day, I could much more easily and quickly change from one chord to another. As much as I've relied on playing the guitar to support my devotional chanting, this was huge for me. At my first session with the occupational therapist, she learned I played the guitar, and at the next session, I was giving her a guitar lesson. I had been scheduled to be there for 5 to 7 days and was out in less than 72 hours. The one thing that took longer to recover and remains a bit of an issue is my balance, for which I continued with outpatient therapy for several weeks after returning home. I was calm and in a good frame of mind throughout. When I could play the guitar, doing chord changes still somewhat tentatively, I posted a video of my chanting from the rehab hospital. Many friends remarked about my positive attitude at that time. I do not doubt that Mohanji's grace and protection helped me minimize the situation and speed up my recovery. Interestingly, one of the comments on the video post was, "Of course, you are making surprising progress. You have powerful beings helping you." Watching that video again recently reminded me of how the left side of my mouth was not even moving properly due to the partial paralysis to my left side. Ganesh communicated with me during the first few days in the hospital and let me know that Mohanji was asking about me and that he wanted me to know that he was with me and protecting me. However, by the time I came home, I had forgotten all about that initial call from Ganesh during my drive from California and the messaging back and forth over the next few days. It was a few months before I remembered that call, and when I did, I was awed by the fact that Mohanji had tuned in to what was going on with me from halfway around the world before I had even realized the seriousness. Fast forward to August 2018, and I was attending a weekend program with Mohanji in Virginia. Several of us had traveled there from Sedona, and we were blessed to have a short group meeting with Mohanji during one of the breaks. The topic of the nature of his expanded awareness came up, and I shared how Mohanji had been aware of the fact that I was having this major health issue from halfway around the world before I was even aware. It was then that he commented that there had been intervention from the beginning so that the effects would be greatly reduced and that there would be more series of minor experiences instead of the major one that would have otherwise happened. I did indeed have that series of what seemed just short and minor disease spells that turned out to be warnings of something more major happening. Though perhaps I should have known and quietly felt that I had been helped more than I know, this direct confirmation from Mohanji was a powerful revelation, and I could and all I could do was express my deepest, humblest gratitude at that moment. It is truly a blessing to be guided and protected by Mohanji and the entire tradition of liberation which he represents. I am forever grateful and offer my most humble prostrations to the consciousness we know as Mohanji. The next story is by Nilima Vipu, written from India, A Gift of a New Life. To describe a master's grace upon us is a very difficult task, as we, with our limited human faculties, cannot understand the extent to which a master helps a devotee to cross the quagmire of karma. Here is one such humble attempt of mine about how Mohanji saved my mother from a painful health issue. In March 2019, my mother had developed some gynecological problems, wherein she was advised to have a hysterectomy after the usual round of tests, including a biopsy. Thankfully, the test did not reveal anything to trigger panic, but the operation was mandatory to avoid any future problems that could occur considering her age. Before this, my mother never faced any serious health issues, and this would be the first time she would be admitted to a hospital. The thought of seeing her on a hospital bed was making me extremely depressed, but I assured myself excuse me, that Mohanji was taking care of everything. We planned to have our operation in May, as it would be summer vacation for my kids, and I could be with my parents to help them during this period. On the morning of the operation, while my mother was under the knife, I went on a chanting mode of the Mohanji Gayatri Mantra all through the duration. The operation was successful. However, the ordeal started the next day. She was coughing constantly, and the X ray report showed a severe lung infection in spite of all antibiotics that had been injected, as is always done after surgery. Her coughing continued for 2 days continuously. She couldn't take anything orally even after these 3 days of operation. Her hemoglobin level had dropped considerably. She had become so weak that she was unable to speak even for a minute. Adding to her trouble, she developed dysentery. The oxygen levels in the blood went so low that she had to be put on an oxygen mask. Unable to find the cause of the lung infection in this hospital, the doctors advised her to be shifted to another hospital to get more tests done to know the cause of the lung infection. While my mother was going through all these, I messaged Mohanji to take care of her and relieve her from the suffering. He replied that he was taking care of her. He also said that one has to go through these things and changing their course would affect them negatively. He advised me to do a few things to reduce her karma, which I did immediately. I was very frightened seeing her in this situation, but I had the faith that Mohanji was working on her. A few days later, she was shifted to yet another big hospital, and all the necessary tests and scans were done to find out the root cause of her lung infection. By his grace, all the tests were normal, but she was still on oxygen. She was also given a distant Maitri. As a Maitri practitioner, I also gave her a Maitri. Interestingly, my mother would feel Mohanji's hand on her head even after I would remove mine. She could feel his loving and a gentle energy healing her. Slowly but gradually, her condition improved. She started taking solid food, and all her complications gradually started decreasing. Mohanji's grace was visible. The critical case, which was being referred to the ICU, the intensive care unit, was easily transformed into a positively responding case. Her dysentery stopped, the hemoglobin count became normal, the lung infection reduced considerably, the persistent cough was gone, and the oxygen saturation levels returned to normal. In a couple of days, she was able to breathe normally and without any external support. After a week's stay in the new hospital, she was declared fit to be discharged. A normal post surgery 5 day stay in the hospital got extended into a 12-day long stay. But all is well, and that ends well. Now she's recovering very fast, which is Mohanji's grace in full bloom. Mohanji not only took care of my mother, but he took care of me as well in this tough time. I was with my mother the whole time with almost no sleep and no rest in the hot summer for 12 days. I had to shuttle between our house and the hospital in the hot sun to take care of my kids and to cook. I could feel his energy take over whenever I felt exhausted. He always consoled me whether I would cry at my mother's whenever I would cry at my mother's painful condition. He gave me the mental and physical strength to go through all of this. It was a real ordeal to see my mother lying so helplessly for days together, and at the same time to put on a brave face in front of everyone and cheer up my mother. He made me take care of my mother as a small baby. It was Mohanji everywhere. I always felt only he existed. I was nowhere present. Any volume of words would fall short to express my gratitude to the unconditional love and protection Mohanji showers upon us. Thank you, my Gurudev, for everything. Love you forever. So we come to the end of day three of uh, the reading of this book, Guru Leela, Grace That Heals, book number 3. Jai Mohanji.